My good people, thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're working on a 2011 Porsche Carrera 911S. Today on the 911 behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace the rear control arms. Today, we're going to be using our Mila kit. Now, this kit is going to include all 5 arms that you're going to need to do either side of the car. And on top of that, we also give you a listing for the hardware should you decide to replace all the hardware along while you're doing the arms. Now, we're going to be working on the lift behind me. This is a job that you can do in the garage or on the floor in your driveway. Just make sure you're using jack stands and a floor jack. Now, a couple things to look out for when you're doing this. Typically, these arms are going to last you anywhere between 60 to 100,000 miles. It's all going to depend on the history of the car, how you drive the car, and the roads that you drive the car on. Now, the car behind me specifically is a New York City car. It only has 64,000 miles on it, but we're getting some creaks from the rear bushings, and you can see some cracking in them as well. So this car is definitely due for a replacement. Now we know what we're working with. Let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, we have a good amount of tools that we're going to need, starting with wrenches. Wrenches are going to be your best friend in this job, specifically ratcheting wrenches. Today we have a 21, an 18, and a 16 millimeter ratcheting wrench, as well as their standard counterpart. We have a pickle fork and a ball joint separator tool. This is CTA 4013, set of long nose pliers, 2 different size flathead screwdrivers. We have a T25, a 10 millimeter socket, and then same as the wrenches, we have 16, 18, and 21 millimeter sockets, different sizes and lengths. You'll see how we use those when we get started. In addition to that, we have a 1/4 inch and a 3/8 ratchet. We have the same thing for our torque wrenches, both a 1/2 inch drive and a 3/8 drive, as well as a big 1/2 inch breaker bar should we need it to get any of these seized bolts free on this car. We have a hammer and a different assortment of punches, as well as a big pry bar, and then some nice to haves, an electric impact, and then electric ratcheting tools. And it never hurts to have a Sharpie marker and a paint marker should you want to mark everything once it's torqued down. Now that we have our tools covered, let's get started on this DIY. To get started, we're going to go ahead and remove our wheel first using a 19 millimeter socket. Now with our wheel off, let's lift up the car completely and work underneath. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove our belly pan. So to do that, you're going to need a T25. There's about 13 screws that hold it into place, and then 2 10 mils, which I'll show you in a moment. Then you're going to have 2 plastic 10 millimeters, one on the far right and one on the far left. With those off, now we should be able to just pull this down. Be mindful if you haven't had this off in a while, there's going to be a lot of debris coming at you, so if you're working on the ground, keep those eyes clear. You're also going to pull back towards the back of the vehicle. You want to be careful not to break this. This is kind of like a Kevlar / carbon fiber material, so be gentle with it. Before we go any further, we're going to remove part of this fender liner. So again, a T25 for both of these. And then we have 3 10 millimeter plastic nuts. And it's a good idea if you don't remove this often to do this, because you can see how much crud builds up in here, similar to what you find on like your Mark IV or Mark V Jettas. We'll go back with a vacuum and get all this out before we wrap up the DIY today. Next, the first thing you're going to want to do is remove these 2 13 millimeter bolts that hold in your sway bar bracket. You're going to want to do this on the driver's side as well. Today we're just filming the passenger side, but the steps are going to be completely identical. So 2 13 millimeter bolts, break these off, and then with both of them off on either side, your sway bar will drop down. That'll give us room to get to this eccentric bolt here. And then we have one more cover to take off up front here before we proceed, before I forget. That's held on right here. And then this air duct is simply going to slide forward. Bam. This just feeds air into the brakes to help cool them down. Now before we go ahead and take anything apart, I'm going to take a paint pen and I'm going to mark my eccentric bolts onto the subframe so that when I install everything again, I have somewhat of a rough okay alignment to get me to the shop. So I'm going to use the marks that are already on the eccentric bolt, and I'm going to go ahead and mark this top one here and mark that on the subframe. And then I'll take the if I can, this other one here and mark that on the subframe. And I'm going to do the same thing on my lower control arm. One there. And I have another one. Let's use this top bigger one. Again, pretty rough, but it's just to give us a safe ride to the shop. Now we're going to start with our outer toe arm first. To get started, I'm going to take a screw jack. If you're working at home on the ground, you can replace my screw jack with your floor jack. They're going to do the same job. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up on it and put some pressure. This is going to give the tapered end less of a chance to spin freely on the carrier, thus allowing me to just zip the nut off instead of having to counter hold with the Torx. And then once I have that situated, you're going to need an 18mm wrench or socket to get that top nut off. Beautiful. I'm going to lightly thread the nut back on. And I'm going to take my ball joint separator tool and get it into position. You have your pickled fork end, if you will, that goes above your bushing. And if you need to, you can give it a couple taps with a hammer to sit it into place. With a 24mm socket, I can go ahead and use my separator tool here. You hear a loud pop. That's how you know it's broken free. That'll be good for now. Now we're going to go ahead and loosen our inner eccentric bolt and nut. I'm going to use an 18mm wrench to get my nut started. Once it's started, I can use a ratcheting end to get it off. Now, before I remove the nut all the way off, I'm going to keep it on there, and I'm going to grab my pry bar and just use it to push the eccentric bolt through. Once I get it started, that should be more than enough. I can go ahead and remove my nut fully and pull out my eccentric bolt. If it's still giving you trouble, you can just use the washer end of it to pry it out. You can see we're hitting the exhaust header there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my nut from the ball joint end so I can wiggle my arm upwards. So you can see I was prying it while also wiggling the arm up and down to get it off. I got my new toe arm. I'm going to go ahead and get it into position. While I do that, I'm going to take my eccentric bolt and try to feed it in at an angle similar to what the old one came out as. And then for now, you don't have to worry too much about aligning anything. We're going to do that at the very end. I'm just going to get my nut started on the other side. Don't forget to put your eccentric plate on the other end as well. You're going to have something that looks like the back of your eccentric washer that goes on the inside as well. This allows the car to be aligned properly. Now this hardware specifically can be reused. Typically they don't go bad. They are constantly being undone and done for every time the car gets in alignment. However, our car being a New York car, it saw some salt. Our hardware is pretty corroded, so we're changing it just to ensure that the next time we work on it, we can get to everything and remove everything. And then I'm just going to start it up again with my 18mm ratcheting wrench. And then I'm going to counter hold on the other side with a ratchet and a 19mm socket. All right, that's all still very loose. Now we can go ahead and get our ball joint end started. I'm going to feed our ball joint up. You can see this one's nice and rigid compared to the one that came out, which I'll show you momentarily. I'm going to start the nut. And then similar to how I removed the ball joint, I'm going to go ahead and get my screw jack and raise up on this so that the tapered end can sit flush up against the carrier, thus hopefully allowing me the opportunity to just tighten this with one tool instead of having to counter hold. So let me get my screw jack situated and let's do that. All right, I'm going to take my screw jack, put some pressure on my ball joint end. With that done, I'm going to go ahead and just zap it on with my electric ratchet just to snug it up quickly. And now I'm going to go ahead and torque it down to 56 foot-pounds. Beautiful. Now we're going to lower this. That's going to be one of the last things we tighten. So let's move on to our lower control arm now. All right, my good people, next on the list is removing our diagonal arm. You're going to see at the front end of the subframe here, we have an 18mm nut on the bottom and a 21mm nut up top. We have just enough room to fit a wrench up there to hold while we break free the 18mm bolt on the bottom. So I'm going to take my 21mm open end wrench and feed it through here. I'm gonna take my 18 millimeter on my impact and just zap it off from below. And bam. That nut is gonna remain up top there. If you're lucky, there is a small cavity in the subframe that allows the nut to live in that location. We'll get our bolt off. Now we're gonna work on the other end of our diagonal arm. Same setup, we have a 21 millimeter nut up top and an 18 millimeter nut on the bottom. So let's get situated for that. Here we go, just tap it down with the head of the screwdriver. And now it's just gonna be a bit of a wrestling match to get the arm out of here. You do have this air duct, which is a bit flexible, but it does kind of fight you when you're pulling this out. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling the fork end towards the subframe while I'm pulling out the far end out towards the wheel well. And out it comes. On the bench, we're gonna swap this over to the new arm, which we'll show you once we get to that point. For now, let's continue on with this. All right, my good people, next we're gonna work on removing the lower control arm, or the coffin arm as it's referred to online. And similar to the rear toe arm, I'm gonna go and take my screw jack and put some pressure on the end, on the ball joint end. That way I hopefully have a chance of keeping that tapered in from spinning while I undo the nut. Now the tricky part is getting in there and breaking that nut free. You're gonna need an 18 millimeter wrench. Let me get my wrench on just to get it started, hopefully break it free. So now that it's broken free, I'm gonna take my ratcheting 18 and just try to get it off. Now with that off, let's go ahead and raise the vehicle up and work on our inner bolts before we go ahead and break this ball joint free. We're gonna go ahead and work on loosening up our eccentric bolt in here. That way we can have some play when we go to break our ball joint free. I'm gonna take an 18 millimeter wrench and break this nut free. For now, we're gonna leave it at like this. On this car specifically, we've had an issue with all of the inner lower control arm bolts. They've all seized themselves to the sleeve of the bushing. So I'm not gonna be surprised if we're gonna bail this one out. But for now, our nut is loose. It'll allow the arm to swing down once we break off this ball joint. So let's do that. For this outer ball joint, unfortunately, I can't use the ball joint separator that I used earlier. So I'm just gonna take a standard pickle fork. And just be careful when this does break free, the arm may swing down. So if anyone's below you or below the arm, just be mindful of that. You don't want to take a control arm to the face. So now, as you can see, my lower control arm, the ball joint end is out. However, my eccentric bolt is seized into the sleeve of the bushing. So I'm going to try putting a ratchet on here, maybe the electric impact, and basically just try to turn it and work it free as best as possible. And eventually we'll work it out of here. So what I'm doing here is basically just working the bushing, hopefully free of the bolt. So at this point, what I'm gonna do is, because I had to do this on the other sides of the car, I'm gonna take a punch or an air hammer and just tap it back a little bit, just enough to get it started. Once we get it started enough that the eccentric washer is free of its cavity here, then we'll be able to spin it with a wrench while someone else pries on the back of it so we can get it out all the way. So and then what I'll do is I'll turn on this side and pry at the same time, and it should come out. My good people, before we install our new arm, just a little comparison. You can see, well, one, this ball joint's wasted not only from being original to the car, but hitting it with the pickle fork doesn't help. Regardless though, a lot of play in it. Now, your bushing here where your diagonal arm goes, this one's not terrible. It's gonna be impossible for you to see, but take my word for it. The inside of the bushing is cracked. So if this went any further, you were gonna get either a poor alignment, a poor driving feel, or potentially squeaks driving over the bumps on the road. And then this rear bushing wasn't completely wasted yet. It still had a bit of life left in it, but just something you can use. If you're ever under the car and you're looking, look for cracks in between your bushings, if possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my arm and just feed it up into the subframe and get my eccentric bolt started. It's gonna sit there nice and loose. I'm gonna grab my new Eccentric washer on the other side. Again, don't forget to put this one on. And my nut. Now we're gonna feed our ball joint end. You might have to adjust it a little bit. It's gonna be nice and tight compared to the one that just came out. Just get your nut on the other side and get it started. And now that we have it started, we're gonna bring the car to a easy height to work with. Set up our screw jack, same thing, tapered end, pushed in as far as we can so we can go ahead and tighten that nut down. Then I'm gonna take my 18mm ratcheting wrench and start tightening down this nut. And if you're gonna torque this down at home, you're gonna wanna torque it down to 56 foot-pounds. For today, we're just gonna go ahead and snug it down really well and then hit it with our paint marker just to make sure it's not moving around on us. Beautiful. Now, before I go ahead and reinstall my diagonal arm, I need to swap over the air duct. This is what helps feed air into the brake caliper and rotor to keep everything cool. I'm just gonna take a flathead screwdriver and pry these two tabs off. And it's a matter of separating them. You're gonna see there is a notched area in the arm, which you can see easier on the new arm. And that's where that tab's gonna sit. And similar to the other side, you're not gonna be able to see it, but it's got the same thing on the other side. So you can pull that off. Get it started on the new arm. Bam, baby. Let's work on feeding this in now. Now we're gonna go ahead and feed our diagonal arm in. Same way how we took it out, your fork end towards the control arm. And then same thing, I'm gonna use the screwdriver to align my holes for my bolt. All right. And then using these long needle nose pliers, I'm gonna take my nut and just feed it up top on the subframe like that. And there's a cavity there for it to rest. And then you can use them to hold the nut just enough to get the thread started on the new bolt. I'm gonna take my 21mm socket, feed it back up here. And then I'll start on the other end with my ratchet just by hand. Once I know my nut is good in there, I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with the electric ratchet just to snug it up quickly. And now we're gonna go ahead and torque it to 118 foot-pounds. Beautiful. All right, and same thing as before, I'm gonna use my electric ratchet just to snug everything down. And then we're gonna torque it down to 118 foot-pounds. Beautiful. With that done, all that's left is our two upper arms. Swap those puppies out and then we can tighten everything up. So I'm gonna start by breaking free the nut and bolt combo on both of them. You're gonna need an 18 and a 16mm. I'm gonna use wrenches. One to counter hold and one to break free. Just tap these babies out. Now we're gonna do the same thing to our inside bolts. And same thing, you have an 18 nut and a 16 head on your bolt. You can see all the corrosion that just came out of there. That's what was keeping this in place. I'm just gonna blow this out. 18 and a 16 as well. All right, let me grab our new arms. Don't move a muscle. We'll get these back in place. I'm gonna take my new arm, feed it into place, and take my bolt, start it on one end, replacing our locking nut. Just gonna leave that loose for now. Let's start our other arm on the right-hand side. You might see me using some white goop on these bolts. That's just some liquid moly ceramic paste. So the next time someone comes in here to do this job, they don't struggle as much as we did. Grab my nut on the other end and get that started by hand so that it doesn't fall. All right, I'm gonna counter hold my 16 with the wrench and snug up my 18s with the electric ratchet. That's enough for now. And then same thing on the other side, except I'm doing all ratchet on this one. That's gonna be good for now. They're still loose enough that they can move. Now we're gonna get our hardware started on the outside. And this one, you're just gonna wanna kind of move everything while you try to feed the arms into place. You wanna make sure you feed your bolts from the back side. Start the tip on the carrier. Sometimes it helps to use a screwdriver to line it up like that. And just like the inside, taking my 16mm wrench, 18 on the socket, snug them up, and do the same thing on the other side. And again, these are still very loose. They are not tight by definition. The reason for that is we're gonna set this to ride height before we torque them down. The nice thing about these is all 4 points are gonna be torqued down to 81 foot-pounds. So let's get that set up. All right, so at this point, if you may or may not see, I have my screw jack set up beneath the lower control arm. I have the vehicle set to ride height. And now I'm gonna go ahead and tighten down all 4 ends to 81 foot-pounds. The reason you wanna do this at ride height is because if you didn't and you let the car settle, just tightening down the bushings at settled height, you're gonna bind them up, you're gonna get some rebound, and you're gonna tear your bushing. So definitely wanna avoid that. And now we have our 2 eccentric bolts down below, and we are done with this job. Now with the car still at ride height, you have your 2 bottom eccentric bolts that you're gonna tighten down. If you marked the old bolts, you can go ahead and set them now with a 19 counter hold, and then an 18 to tighten down your lock nut. Now these, if you're gonna torque them down, you're gonna torque them down to 74 foot-pounds. However, this car is gonna go get an alignment, so they're gonna undo these at the shop anyways. So we're just gonna go ahead and snug them down for now. There's one, and same thing with our lower control arm. We have 2 13s on either end if you removed your sway bar brackets like we did at the beginning. And these would be torqued down to 17 foot-pounds. Then you can put your air scoop back in for your brake. And for this one, you're only gonna put the inner T25 in. And now you can put your shield back on and the rest of the hardware. When you push up on the shield, you have these air ducts that the panel keys into. So make sure you slide those forward. You also want to make sure you key the rest of the shield up here, otherwise you'll be flopping in the wind everywhere. Now you can set your two 10mm plastic screws back in. And then all your T25s. And there you have it, my good people. Another DIY in the books. Overall, a pretty straightforward job. A little bit tedious at first with the whole subframe drop and all that, but something that is definitely doable. And again, the Sharpie comes in handy when you mark your old eccentric bolts. That way you can give the car somewhat of a rough alignment before you take it to the shop. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment box below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.